So have you ever had to fire a client and say, it's me? It's not me, it's you? And what was the breakup story?
I've never fired a client and said it was me, not you. If I have fired a client and I let them know that it was them.
You just tell them that you just go out and say you're a nightmare?
Yeah, probably in more words than that. But we've had I remember back to, we had a client call screaming at our accountant, like our internal accountant. And he was just so rude and obnoxious and mean to her. And I called him and I said, listen, we're no longer doing business together.
Sean McCormick is the guy who looks at the lead gen industry and says, yeah, but what if we did this ethically? AKA, how to survive the digital Thunderdome. He's built a career on trust, transparency, and, let's be real, calling out nonsense when he sees it. Whether it's blending margins like a bad cocktail or clients treating vendors like piñatas, Sean isn't here for the smoke and mirrors.
Eric Troutman, the czar of the TCPA, isn't just the guy you call when your phone rings too much. He's the guy you must call. Need to navigate the legal minefield of robocalls, texts, and telemarketing nightmares? Troutman doesn't just give you advice. He hands you a roadmap, a compass, and a do not press this button sign. Practical? Yes. Actionable? Absolutely. And if you're not calling him first, let's be honest, you're probably making a mistake.
Well, welcome to the ADOTAT Show. I'm Pesach Lattin, your host, part-time ad whisperer, full-time chaos coordinator. Today, we're diving into the world of lead gen and ethics with Sean McCormick, a man who's so transparent about transparency, he probably alphabetizes his spice rack. Sean, first of all, the hardest question, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I don't alphabetize my spice rack, but I color code my closet with my button down from lightest to darkest, so not far off.
All my shirts are white, so it's pretty easy.
That will make it easier.
I have 50 white shirts, the same exact brand. Sean, let's talk a little bit about the dirty secret in performance marketing. Blending margins between low-cost and high-cost partners is the equivalent of serving filet mignon on a paper plate. It looks impressive until you realize it's a mess. How do we fix this disaster without torching budgets and relationships?
It's a really tough question that, it's going to take time for the industry to really solve and figure out on its own. When I look at it, we've had a bunch of companies in the past couple of years go public. And when companies go public, they have margins to adhere to and investors to answer to. And when these things happen, it becomes a little bit more difficult, especially at the rate that they've been acquiring businesses. But I think it starts with the little guys, and this is one of those things. It's not top down; it's bottom up. And so it starts. There's so many wonderful ad networks, agencies, networks, marketplaces out there that aren't publicly traded, and it starts at home. It doesn't start coming from the big publicly traded companies. And it starts with advertisers, right? The advertisers really need to do a better job of cutting off sub-IDs that are not performing, that aren't meeting their ROAS, they're not meeting their ROI, and really focusing and honing in on traffic that is converting and doing well. I've heard stories over the years, and I'm sure you have as well, of companies that will actually randomize the sub-IDs so that it's harder for advertisers to figure out where the traffic's coming from so that they can continue to keep their budgets high and blend margins. So the truth of the matter is, Pace, I don't know, but I do know if there is going to be a change in quality, because I think that's really what we're talking about, it starts from the bottom up, and it starts with, there's some really fine networks out there. I think, a place that used to be, Janine at Rex, does a really nice job. She focuses on quality. They're a wonderful company, and it starts with companies like Janine. It starts with companies like ours, Point MTK, just doing really good things in the market and not really letting the margin crisis and the quality crisis concern us. And hopefully that's enough way for us to win more budget and compete with the bigger guys.
So clients demand transparency, then they cheap the cheapest vendor like it's a Black Friday at Walmart. Isn't that a little bit like complain about food poisoning after you went to the gas station for sushi?
Look, I think being on the advertiser side is probably more complex than we'll ever give it credit for. I don't know if you've had time if you've been on the client side before, but At my last stop at EXL, we're both the client and the publisher. And, being the advertiser and the publisher, it's like being the center of the bow tie, being in the knot. And there's not a lot of room to breathe right there because you're getting it from both angles. You don't ever get to be the client in that world. But I will say this, when clients want quality and complain but not willing to pay more for top quality traffic, that's a problem. And it should be a red flag to any network that is looking to work with an advertiser, any agency, any publisher, that if there's not increased upside on performance and there's not transparency on the results you're driving, that's a red flag. And that might not be a good client for you. And so I agree, it's like getting sushi at a gas station truck stop. But at the same time, look, we have to look inward and we have to hold ourselves accountable. And again, top up approach. If we're not doing the little things in this industry that will keep us propelling forward, then what are we doing here? It just doesn't make sense to me.
You said before that vendors shouldn't be the punching bags. What's your most bad day scapegoat story? Did someone blame their KPIs on Mercury retrograde?
Look, we've had a lot of bad days, and most recently, we were running a campaign. I think it was for NEC and Mass Tort, and we had the 5-bell alarm go off, pause all traffic. There's fraudulent activity going on. It's so we pause and we continually check in with the client. No news. I got a call from a friend in the industry that said, "Hey, did you hear about XYZ company?" And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, they were victim to this huge fraudulent network. We're caught up in it now." And I'm like, "What's going on?" So he told me what's going on, and it turns out this was so far downstream, nowhere in our sphere of influence on the traffic we were driving. But the client never came back to us and said, "Hey, you guys had nothing to do with this. You didn't do anything wrong." So look, I think things like that happen all the time in our space where people are falsely accused and falsely blamed for doing things that might be malicious or accused of malicious intent. And look, if you don't have thick skin in this business by now, you're probably in the wrong business. It's, again, looking inward, we have to do a better job of managing expectations. We're not going to get praised for the work that we do well. We're not going to get praised for the high quality that we drive. And from time to time, we are going to be called out for something we didn't do, and we're going to have to defend our honor. So that comes with being a business owner in performance marketing. It comes with being an adult. It comes with being a parent. It comes with every aspect of life. So I don't see any different in our industry pace.
So you live by the 5 T's of trust, truth, transparency, traction, and trajectory. If you had to cut one to save budget, which one would get the boot?
Trajectory. Always slow growth to save budget, right?
Right.
We can continue to run the business as it is. We don't run our business hiring people hoping for future growth. We hire people for the business that we have today. And so, you always cut trajectory to save, the future. So, does that mean you might not be able to invest in people for growth? It might. But at the same time, you look at all of the T's, the other ones are so important. Right? If you don't have trust, truth, transparency, like how are you going to look at your kids? How are you going to send them off to school and tell them to do the right thing if you can't do it yourself?
So what do you think if the industry doesn't clean up its act? Won't regulators do it? So what would be the first casualty if the government steps in?
Well, regulators are doing it, right? We're seeing it with TCPA now. That we saw it with the Can Spam Act of 2003. Look, we are a regulated industry, but not a highly regulated industry. We're nowhere near the way that finance is regulated. And so if we don't clean up our act, we will be regulated the way that the financial and banking services sector is. We are slowly inching towards that. I've been saying for years when it comes to lead generation, we can't sell the 10% fruit juice, 90% water model. It doesn't work. And so at some point, companies need to compromise growth and profitability for doing the right thing and having a sustainable business, but more importantly, a sustainable industry.
So I want to go back to that statement that vendors aren't punching bags. Let's face it, they're treated like piñatas. Clients swing wildly, hoping something sweet will fall out. How do we stop the abuse and build partnerships that don't evolve into finger pointing, into emotional therapy sessions?
Yeah, that's a tough one to solve, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm hopeful that we can probably solve it at some point with either blockchain technology, or we can just save it with the transparent exchange. If you think back to the days with what's Jeremy Bloom's company, Integrate,
Right.
when they first got started.
Is he still in Denver skiing?
He's dude, look up Integrate. They're doing fantastic. They shifted their model.
Well, he's also an Olympic skier, right? Isn't that?
And former NFL athlete. Yeah. But no, their business is doing well, but they pivoted to the B2B marketplace from that B2C where they started. And I think the answer to your question lies somewhere with what Jeremy started doing with Integrate, with what PX is doing today, but just more in a transparent manner in lead generation. I think anytime we're playing kind of in this, behind the cloak or the wizard behind the curtain mentality of, I understand we need to protect relationships and there's margin there, but if we can't work in a transparent world where our, networks, agencies, brokers need to work in a transparent world, and if we can't do that, it's going to be harder and harder for us to live in an industry that doesn't fall back to regulation. We need to know who we're working with. We need to know the traffic they're utilizing and driving. We need to know the real sub IDs. So I think if we can just be more transparent with one another on what tactics we're utilizing and what partners we're using, I think we'll be in a much better space.
So have you ever had to fire a client and say, it's me? It's not me, it's you? And what was the breakup story?
I've never fired a client and said it was me, not you. If I have fired a client and I let them know that it was them.
You just tell them that you just go out and say you're a nightmare?
Yeah, probably in more words than that. But we've had I remember back to, we had a client call screaming at our accountant, like our internal accountant. And he was just so rude and obnoxious and mean to her. And I called him and I said, listen, we're no longer doing business together. How you treat me should be how you treat everyone that I work with here, all my colleagues. You didn't do that, and therefore we're not doing business anymore.
So I want to talk about a little bit about advisory boards. They often see the weirdest pitches. What was the most bizarre sales pitch that you ever sat through, and did it involve PowerPoint, pyrotechnics, or an actual marching band?
I can't say that either of those things happened to me. I have sat through my fair share of PowerPoints. The weirdest pitch, that is a really good question. Man, I've seen so many things that I look at and they're interesting ideas, to say the least. I don't want to belittle anyone's creativity, but I'm going to skip on that one just because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
So, that's okay. Humility is your mantra, but there has to be a moment where you trade it in for a sledgehammer. What would be that moment? Is it fraudsters? Fraudsters are definitely my kryptonite patients, that's for sure.
Yeah, if there was a kind of office space taking the printer out to the yard with the baseball bat moment, it's definitely.
Oh, I've thrown printers through windows. I have.
Yeah,
I've opened windows and just dropped them. Yeah.
Have you seen that episode, that movie Office Space back in the day? The PCS load letter. What the F does that mean?
No, I haven't. I know the movie. I haven't seen it though. I know the reference.
Yeah, this printer never seems to work, so they take it one day out of the office and just beat it with a hammer. Look, I don't want to ever induce physical harm on anybody, but I will say that, there's no place for fraud in our industry. There's no place for fraud in any industry. It's not something that we should even have to put up with as business owners, as advertisers, as publishers, as agencies, networks, brokers. There's zero tolerance policy.
And so ethics seems a little bit like kale at a barbecue. Everyone claims they want it, but when the plate comes around, no one touches it. You've said that self-regulation beats government oversight. How do we make ethics actionable instead of another buzzword on a deck?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that there's a number of ways to skin that cat. And I think that there should be ethical requirements to own a business. I think there should be ethical requirements to join organizations like Reach. I think there should be ethical requirements to join, even to attend some of the industry's most popular trade shows. to join some ad exchanges, there should probably be ethical requirements as well. So I think that if we start to put a little bit of self-regulation around defining ethics and then holding classes and having, if it's as stupid as having everyone have an ethical badge so they complete the course, great. It's a starting point. But look, you know as well as I do that this industry is tiny, and we need, as business owners, as affiliate managers, as account managers, we need to do a better job of sharing when and where fraudulent activity occurs so that those people are just ridded from the industry. We need to get rid of them. And there needs to be more. You have companies, Anora does a nice job. There's some companies that do nice jobs on proactively trying to combat fraud, but I think that we can probably do more. We should share that information. It'd be great if Anora shared all of the publishers that were kicked off the platform or where they're seeing bad, IPs come through. Maybe have something on the blockchain that's anonymous so that if you hit it, you ping it, and then you ping it in Everflow or Impact or any of the other ones that you just know immediately that's a known abuser. So I think we could use some technology, but also at the same time, we need to do a better job of sharing, using our words and communicating more with one another of what we're seeing and who's really the aggressor on these things.
Have you ever turned down a client because they didn't align with your values? Regrets, or was it the smartest call you ever made?
Look, I think that there's, just being very candid with you, I think that there's the 25-year-old me and the 43-year-old me.
Right.
And I think at 25, I probably wasn't turning down many campaigns. At 43, we won't run tobacco campaigns anymore. We won't run alcohol campaigns anymore. We won't run vaping campaigns. We won't, unless they're anti, right?
Right.
So look, I won't run gambling. So I think there's certain things that as individuals don't align with my values and don't align with who I am as a person anymore. And I won't run political ads either. I don't want to be involved with either side of the aisle, to be honest with you, when it comes to trying to sway someone's decision that they should be really making up on their own.
So let's move from ethics to metrics that keep everyone honest when the numbers don't lie, but sometimes they fib a little.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves playing with them, but no one seems to read the instructions. How do you cut through the smoke and mirrors to find the real insights that matter?
Well, I believe in this industry there's, you could almost start at the top and work your way down with conversion data. Conversion data is usually a good starting point and gives you a good idea of quality. But, you work your way down from there. It's as simple as understanding where your clicks are coming from, understanding, impressions, clicks, conversion. Are you working on retargeting? And so I think what you might be asking is, how do you know you're not being taken for a ride from a client, perhaps? That might be throttling conversions. Maybe that's the real question here. I don't know. But I would say we typically, in everything we do, we have a baseline of where we expect conversions to be. And if they're not there, we simply pause the campaign and you either go back to the client and say, hey, this isn't backing out how I'd expect, or, you don't run the campaign. You move on to the next.
You talk about traction trajectory a lot. What's the difference between a campaign on track and one so off the rails, but it looks fine on paper?
Man, yeah. So the biggest difference there is when clients are telling you to ramp, and then they tell you to pause because your quality is not meeting their back-end metrics. So I think that specifically when you don't have really strong communication from your client, you're really set up for failure. And many times that can lead to payment issues. It can lead to downstream publisher issues. It can lead to a host of problems. So if you're in this space and you're newer, or maybe you've been here for a long time, I don't know, but really what you want to do is have open communication with the client, and it's not go live and then let the client report back to you on what's going on. I'd highly recommend being proactive with your client and understanding what's going on with the data, the leads, the emails, the clicks, whatever metric you're working on. You really have to understand what your client's goals are and be in communication with them. If you're relying on the client to communicate with you what's going on, you're already set up for failure.
If you could banish one metric forever, which one is getting the boot?
look, I think in our space, they're all really, really important. But probably, in lead gen, we talk about revenue per user. And that essentially tells us how much money we're making as a publisher. And it really doesn't take a lot of other things into effect, like LTV. It doesn't take into account client conversion metrics. It doesn't take into account other tangible assets you may be getting with that data of the user coming through. I'd say probably RPU, revenue per user, is one that is so finite, it doesn't do a good enough job.
I think the first time I heard ARPU, I thought it was the guy from The Simpsons. It was that convention person's talking about ARPU. I'm going, what is that the guy? Is that the guy from The Simpsons who runs the Quickie Mart?
Yeah, I feel at times we're in an episode of The Simpsons in our space.
Sure. When clients obsess over one metric, which one makes you scream, that's not how this works? Or does everyone define ROI differently?
I think it's a two-part question. The first part is, if a client is just focused on like the one stage before rubber meets the road, so if they're focused on, let's just say we're in the Medicare space and they're focused on appointments. How many appointments were booked? What was their cost per appointment? And if they're focused on that instead of their conversion rate, then you're looking at it wrong. And I don't know how else to tell you. I think what was the second part of your question? It was,
I don't remember what I asked.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, basically, is it because ROI is defined differently by everyone?
Well, I think we just proved that, right? If you're looking at a cost per appointment, but you should be really looking at a cost per sale or cost per new policy or cost per, new widget, then yeah, of course you're not looking at. Look, we need to be aligned with the advertiser on what their most important metric is, and really truthing them on making sure that is their most important metric. If it's not, then I've had it have time and time again, and shame on me, where I'm told that the most important metric was one thing, and then you get a campaign pause request because you find out that the metric was something else. So I think one is making sure you have the right metric and really truthing the client on that. And then two, as we said earlier, following up with the client to ensure that that metric is not a moving target, that it remains consistent.
So AI marketing, some people say it's game-changing revolution, and some say it's a glorified buzzword. Are we building a better ad machine? Are we just handing our bad ideas to faster robots?
Well, I think it depends who's building the LLM on that one and what back-end data is being used fit. So I think when you look at AI in marketing or performance marketing or whatever sort of marketing you might be doing, direct marketing, I think that understanding what you're feeding into the model is really, really important. And so AI can do a number of really, really great things, but it still needs to be truthed by a person. And I still think we're probably a little ways off and not far in finding in AI being able to truth AI. And what I mean by that is, you think about the whole user journey. So think about having a piece of signal data hit your CDP. Your CDP then goes out and builds the ads, targets the individual, but somewhere in there, the AI builds the ad, and it just reads the signal wrong. So now you have someone who has a hobby in automotives, and we're sending them, a selling, a copy and creative. So I think just truthing the AI at first is important. Building the model that actually has traction and has transparency that you can trust. So going back to the T's, you're going to be okay. I think that if you are building an LLM to replicate what your business is doing, and if you're cutting corners, you're going to be in for a big, 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 big headache.
So which AI trend do you think feels overhyped? Kind of like the hoverboard of marketing.
I'm still waiting on my hoverboard, by the way. It's funny. It depends who you ask. For me, and my business partner, Zach, probably would say the same thing, is I just don't believe that building direct response AI copy is there yet.
Right.
It still it still feels not created by a real person. So in that instance, it feels disingenuous. So I'd say AI, when it comes to creating copy for advertising, is probably the most important one right now that probably needs some more work.
So if you could give your AI marketer one personality trait, sarcastic, earnest, or data obsessed, which wins? And why?
Well, if I'm building it for a client, I'm definitely making it data obsessed. If I'm building it for me personally, I'd make it sarcastic because I always prefer a little bit of humor.
Would it start roasting you in Slack?
It has to. I mean, why not? I want on Slack, emails, text, roast me all day. I mean, it's fun. It's part of life. And if we can't laugh at ourselves, then I think we're missing a really important piece of being alive here today on this planet.
So I want to ditch the robots and strand you on an island. You have to drop the spreadsheets and hypotheticals. You're stranded on a desert island. There's no Wi-Fi. Rescue isn't coming for a while. What 5 people are you bringing to make the exile?
Yeah, I think I hope I put this down on my answer sheet. You know, my wife and my 4 kids. It's a no-brainer for me.
You did.
Yeah. Look, I think
they wouldn't drive you absolutely insane. Like no.
It wouldn't. It would.
Like if do you have a teenager? Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
How would he survive without TikTok?
Well, she doesn't have TikTok.
Thank God.
Yeah. So look, I think for me, I'd want things. If I'm stranded on an island, I'd want things to feel as normal as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to freak out. So if my kids are harassing me for more time on their iPads, so be it. If my wife is yelling at me of what's for dinner, so be it. I want things to feel as normal as possible. I want to feel comfortable on this stranded island, and nothing would make me feel more comfortable than being there with my family.
So let's just say you find an iPad. It has one movie or book that you'd stream on repeat until rescue arrives. What would it be? And you can't say Castaway.
Oh man! So if it's just for me and not for the whole family, I'm probably listening to Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. That's a book that I've really enjoyed, and something that I turn back to quite often. If it's the family, I'm probably streaming like the movie Elf or something like that.
So desert islands have terrible catering. What's the one meal you risk swimming back to civilization for?
Oh man,
risking sharks for pizza feels very solid.
Yeah, I'd probably try to get back for a steak. I'd just a nice.
But would you settle for chips and guacamole?
I don't think I would. Although if there's lobster, off the coast of the island there, we'd try to find that for sure.
Yeah, and some coconut milk maybe. If you could recruit one person to negotiate your rescue, who's getting the SOS call and why?
Probably Elon Musk, right? I think he's done a good job on building rockets and underground boring companies.
But would you really want the bill from him, though? He's going to charge you.
He'd probably just charge it to the government. We'd be fine.
First thing you do when you're rescued, besides deleting all the sand selfies, it's going to be like a lessons learned post on LinkedIn, I think.
It probably would. Yeah, it would probably have to be. I think the first thing I do is probably reassess my life in one manner. I'd probably look and see, what do I have in my life today that I no longer is doing me any justice. I think I'm just as guilty as most in a very consumer-centric economy where I probably have more things than I need to. So I think that would be a good starting point, and you may have led me to a 2025 New Year's resolution. I'm not sure yet.
You built a career on grit, growth, and relentless pursuit of clarity. But let's get real. What's the one thing that would completely surprise your colleagues?
I don't know what that means.
What's one thing about you that would completely surprise your colleagues? I know I'm having trouble with the word completely.
There's probably a couple things. People probably don't know, the side of me that really enjoys solitude, being out in nature, fly fishing, hiking. I'm definitely an extroverted introvert, so I prefer to be alone and in peace and quiet, more so than being out at trade shows or being out in large social gatherings and events.
So you said failure teaches more than success. What's your favorite failure, the one that you wouldn't trade for anything?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I think it was probably a multitude of failures that led to this moment. But this is something I haven't really shared with anyone in the public sector. But I stopped drinking about 8.5 years ago. And that might be something that people in the industry would probably be surprised to learn when I'm at trade shows.
Right.
I don't announce it. I don't say I don't drink anymore.
Yeah, I stopped about 2016 also.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was a choice. I'm like horribly allergic to it.
Yeah.
Makes me very sick now.
It's funny. So, but I don't broadcast that. You know, if I'm in a trade show, I'll probably have a water with a splash of cran. No one's really going to be none the wiser. Well, now everyone will be, but I think that's probably, a multitude of failures in life going up to that point where I just decided that I no longer wanted to drink anymore. My wife and I were separated for a bit, and I took a hard look in the mirror and said, you know what, this doesn't serve me anymore.
So your mantra is nice, sober, important. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it's nice to be important, but it's better to be nice. So I have a friend, his name is Dave Curran, who passed away about 96 days ago. And Dave...
Sorry to hear.
Thank you. He's the most unbelievable person that you haven't met. He started the Be Nice Today project, and so he taught me a lot of things about life, and most importantly, just the simplicity of just being nice for one day, how much impact you could have on the world. So that mantra was passed to me from Dave, and it's something I'll always hold in my heart. I have a sticker on my car that says Be Nice Today. And I also have another sticker that says Live Like Dave. And so for me, it's a way to honor a friend, but that's a way that he taught me many years ago, that I believe that if we could just all be a little bit nicer to one another, we could really make this world a much better place.
So you mentioned that Jeff Wilkins is your Yoda. So if Yoda were giving ad advice, what would he say to marketers today? I wrote down, clicks don't equal customers, they do not.
Well, first off, Jeff was my first mentor in the space. If those that don't know Jeff Wilkins, he'll probably be blushing if he ever sees this interview, but he was just so important to me. It was my first job out of college at Co-Reg 360. He taught me everything about business and how to go into negotiating, how to sell, how to be a good person, how to take care of your employees. He really taught me everything that I know today. But the cool thing about Jeff is he's the most humble individual you'll ever meet. He's sold, maybe 15, 20 companies by now. He's on the board of a lot of companies, and he's one of those people that will take your call no matter what, regardless of what he has going on in his life. And what would he say? I think he'd probably say what Dave said, just be nice and close the deal, maybe. That's probably what he'd say.
The ability to start from scratch obviously takes guts, and you've done it a couple times, more than a couple times. If you could tattoo one value on your team's metaphorical forehead, what would it be? And I have a bet it's transparency in bold, underlined for dramatic effect. Yeah,
I think if there were two, transparency would be number two. I think number one would be just a real simple, never give up. In any company we've been at, even when I was at iEfficient with my co-founder Vince, he's still running that company and he's done a tremendous job. We always joked that we had a lot of shit moments, where we probably should have run out of cash and never did. We just were always able to find a way. And we would always joke that they should write a book about us called Too Stupid to Fail. And so I think, that's one of the things is just don't give up. Don't overthink what needs to be done. Just do it. And if you throw in the towel, there's no honor in that. So do as much as you can for as long as you can, but don't ever tell yourself it's over, because it isn't until you give up. So if your career movie, what would be the title? Risky Business, Moneyball, or Mad Max Beyond Marketing? Look, I have a special place in my heart for the Oakland Athletics and Moneyball mantra that they brought into Major League Baseball. I think how they looked at data and analytics differently. is something we could all learn in digital marketing.
It's also about finding the value that others miss, I think.
Yeah, I mean, tremendously. Like, you think about it, and how many people were early to TikTok advertising, how many people were early to Facebook from MySpace, right? What else is out there that we're missing, right? Is it Blue Sky? Is it some other,
TikTok
social
could be gone on January, 14th, 13th or something? We don't know.
19th. Yeah, I don't think it will be. But yeah, I think that
but the possibilities is enough that marketers are definitely scared, especially those that invested their whole life in.
Look, if I were a betting man, and I think I've proved over the course of my career that I am, I'd bet that TikTok will be here on January 20th.
So what's one message that you'd plaster across Times Square for the next generation of marketers if you could?
Do the right thing and you always have a job.
It's been a wild ride, ethics, fraud, desert islands, and even a little Yoda wisdom. For those listening, where can they find you and learn more about your work at Point MTK?
Yeah, LinkedIn.com /online lead generation is my handle on LinkedIn. You could find me on Twitter, CEO by 25. And you can drop me an email, Sean at Point MTK.
And that's a wrap on the ADOTAT Show. Huge thanks to Sean McCormick for breaking down the fine line between ethical lead gen and digital dumpster fire. If you're blending margins like a back alley mixologist, consider this your intervention. Big shout out to our sponsors, incremental.com. Because guessing isn't a strategy. Rembrandt.com, making ads that don't just exist, but actually get seen. Troutman Amin, keeping the lawyers happy and the TCPA headaches away. Without them, this would just be me ranting into the void. Stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday. See you next time.